All right, so we're starting to see a lot more files and a lot more folders. In the past, we've just dealt with like one or two things, and then maybe a corresponding spec folder, and then maybe we dealt with a runner file as well. We're starting to make this slow transition into Sinatra, and then eventually into Rails. Rails actually has 53 files and inside of different folders right off the bat. So it's important to at least get some semblance of an understanding of what everything does, but you don't need to know exactly what everything does. A lot of this is done ahead of time so that young developers don't have to worry about all the setup and things of that nature. So we cloned down like the beginning of like an ActiveRecord skeleton, right? Like a Ruby ActiveRecord skeleton. We have this app config db spec and test folder. This one I don't need. It's a mistake. I'll remove that later. So we have 4 folders, and we have this gem file right here. Now, if you remember from the old days when we were just doing like require pry up top and require faker and like require all these different outside libraries, we just required them at the top. What this is saying is, what this gem file is basically listing out every single gem that you're going to need inside of one file. So instead of doing like gem install rspec, gem install pg, gem install rake for every single one, all you really need to do is run something called bundle install. Bundle install is basically going to bundle it all together and install all of it at one time. If you have already installed it, that's great. It'll just say using whatever. If you have not installed it, it's going to turn green and saying like I'm installing this right now. And some of these are larger than others. This gem file lock will basically say like I'm going to lock in the versions that we're using, and you can kind of see even though I have only like 5 or 6 gems over here inside the gem file lock, those gems rely on other gems. So like I need action pack and action view and active support in order to use something like rspec. ActiveRecord will require things inside of here that I'm not exactly sure. Like there's just
all the action stuff.
All the action stuff, yeah.
Also, this file is pre-populated from bundle install.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If I delete this outright, what will happen is if I run bundle install here, again, pay close attention to here. This is going to be automatically generated. There. So it installed things. It says that, hey, you actually didn't have Ruby 1.7.0, so that's green. I actually need to install it. And then database cleaner and that. So that's the gem file and the gem file lock. It's basically saying what gems am I going to need to run this app. In our case, we're going to need rspec to write our tests, PG to connect to a Postgres database, rake to do those types of rake commands and all of this other stuff. The gem file lock is what's happening underneath the hood. Like these are the different versions you're going to need in addition in order to install all of this stuff.
It locks
in the versions as well. So it's kind of like if I were to do a bundle install on my machine, like I know that I'm using the same versions as if you were to clone it down and install it on your machine.
Because download like an old version. If you
it could be, yeah. It could be like this particular app right now. This is what happens. This is called technical debt, which is I'm writing code that works today that may not work tomorrow. Like this action view 5.1.4. And we might be outdated. We might be 4.1.5, and at that point, active support 5.1.4 doesn't work. So you need to make sure all of your like stuff is running up to date all the time, including all the software in your machine, including homebrew and all of that kind of stuff. So this is a way to guarantee across the board that everyone's using the exact same version. This rake file here, there's a lot of stuff going on. But essentially what this is doing is it's giving you the ability to do custom commands that you have not really seen before. So we did things like rake, db, migrate, and things like that. There's a way that you can do it manually. You can just do like, you can create a script to create all of your schema migrations and to migrate everything over. But if you wanted to do it inside of here, if you wanted to do like create any sort of custom task, or if you wanted to use like the rake db migrate and all that kind of stuff, it's all located inside of here. There's two custom ones. One is called rake, and then the task is going to be console. Then you can just connect directly to the database here. So if I wanted just to run rake console, it'll connect into the database, the current database that we have right now. And then if I wanted to generate fixtures, there's another custom task for that. The rake DB, migrate, drop, create, all that kind of stuff is found inside of ActiveRecord. So there's in terms of trying to understand every individual thing, there's like just millions of things happening underneath the hood that's built in ahead of time.
So it basically connects to a console and then runs the drop, is what you're doing with that DB drop.
Yes, it connects to the database and then it just drops everything. Drops all the tables.
What happens if I never tried this? What if you just type in rake DB?
That's a great question. I've actually never tried that. I think it might ask you to, like, what do you mean, kind of thing, or it does nothing. And then the README we all know. So we've kind of gone through these four.
It doesn't have a database yet, right?
It does not have a database yet. I have not done that yet. So as we start organizing things, and as you can kind of see all the things that we have here, this list is only going to get larger and larger. So you want to organize your things well. It's kind of like saying if I bought a ton of clothes and I just kept throwing them all over the floor. You know, as I get more and more clothes, the more disorganized things are going to get back. So I need to put them in specific drawers, and you know, collared shirts need to be hung up and suits need to be XYZ. So it's a way to organize. That's what all of these numerous folders are for. So anything revolving around spec files, like if you wanted to test your code in any way, all of that would go inside of here under spec. Anything revolving around your database would go inside this database folder. The configuration of your entire app will all go inside of config. And then right now we only have a models folder, so that's where all your database models are going to go. So remember, each table is plural, like chickens. Like if it was a table, like you would have a class called a class called chicken, and that would go inside of under app models.
Could you also go over the DB part where it says not DB config, sorry, where
Sure.
it's app and database? What are those two?
Sure. So again, this is like what's happening underneath the hood. You don't need to know that all of this stuff right now. Eventually, if you work in Rails, you will need to. What this is doing up top is it's requiring the YAML built-in library, kind of like when you did require CSV. YAML is built into Ruby. The config is saved as a local variable, and it's saying YAML.loadFileConfig database. That's over here. I'll split it. Now, there's going to be 3 different environments. Development is when you're developing things on your own and when you try testing stuff out without tests. That's just on your machine. There's going to be a test environment, which is basically saying like all of your, like whenever you run RSpec test, there's a separate environment for that. There's like an entirely separate bucket. It's kind of like you learn about how to fire a weapon in a classroom. Then when you go out to test it, when you're downrange, you practice shooting. And then when you're in like a production environment, then you're actually deployed or something like some. It's not a perfect analogy, but there's 3 different environments that you can run a database in. Development is just like you playing around with it on your machine. It only lives on this machine, so you're not connecting to like your production database in New York City or something. Test database is the same thing. It lives on your machine, and it's just specifically for all your RSpec tests. And finally, production is like the big one, like the one where all of the data actually lives. Now, the adapter, we talked about specifically that there's different flavors of SQL, right? There's SQLite, MySQL, Oracle, Postgres. Like there's a different flavors of SQL. Our adapter that we're connecting to the database with is called Postgres. So this is the type of database we're using. And then these are the names of the 3 different databases based on your environment. You can name these whatever you'd like, but it usually is budget or whatever your app name is. And for us, it's budget. That's where we stole it from, _development, to say that it's the development database for the budget app, and then for test and production, so on and so forth. So that's what the config is doing here, is loading everything in. And then this giant section right here is basically saying, using ActiveRecord base, I want you to establish a connection to, and I want you to use the adapter of whatever environment we're currently in, that's the app_n. And then I want you to, the name of the database we're establishing a connection to is based on the environment as well. So these kind of connect with this.
It's basically just storing it. The YAML just stores as a hash, and it's just called on the adapter over there. Some sort of like, just to recall. Okay. All right.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, no, that's actually right. Yeah, so it's basically YAML is a data type, and it's basically loading this file and saving as that particular data type, and then we just connect this whole app's. We establish a connection using the Postgres adapter to this particular database or this database based on the environment that you're in.
Would you directly just ActiveRecords base establish connection? The same thing we did with the DB, right? So the DB runs that sort of as an alias. We run like rake. It's actually running rake ActiveRecord base establish connection.
Yeah, underneath the hood for rake DB create and drop and all that kind of stuff. It's establishing a connection and doing extra things on top of it. So the first thing that it does is that it connects to the database, establishes a connection there. That's where this like this loads up right away.
So it's pulling budget from somewhere.
Yeah, budget, because we cloned down the budget just as like a skeleton to get us started, and then we push it into assessment.
Will it change at some point to assessment?
Yeah, you can name this. You can name this whatever you want. I can name this poop and pee and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's like I can name this whatever I like. So for us, actually, why don't we do that? So we'll just change the name of the thing.
You have to like manually like name it?
No, it's kind of like if I were to, let's say I was creating a, 1 second. Let's say I was creating an app called like Amazon Killer, right? By default, it's going to assume that my development database is going to be called Amazon Killer Development, and then my test database would be called Amazon Killer Test. It makes those inferences for me. This app.rb is basically the main meat of everything. So, do you want me to go through this?
Particularly. I'm not the only one here. Yeah, if Alex wants to go through it, let's go through it.
Yeah. So, app environment. Remember, we did we did constants, right? These are called constants when they're all uppercase and separated by underscores. The environment that the app is running in is going to be, if you specify what it is, it'll use that. Otherwise, it will just say it's in development by default, because most of the time you're using things in development, so it'll automatically default to that. When we were doing things like app_n equals test, we overwrote what the environment was, so we were overwriting where we were.
All right.
So it's kind of like when I did app_n equals test, I'm saying like, hey, set the app environment instead to be just the just test or just production or something like that. But by default, it's going to be development. That's essentially.
The guy we were talking to from Braintree was like, or was it? Who was it? Is it Darnell?
Darnell. No.
It's just like, it doesn't really matter. Just we kind of keep.
We were running into a lot of errors because like we would set up like a migrate and test, and then it wouldn't like seed. And then
It would seed in development, but on
Yeah.
in test, yeah.
so then we tried to run seed and test, but then like there was issues with like the config path. Down there with it has model ** with the it was like
Yep.
That was weird. And then we were like messing around with config paths, and he was like telling us, he's like, which file was that? Oh, config/database.yaml. It wouldn't detect what the database was because it was in one app environment.
It's right here. Yeah.
On the left side, database.rb, the config / so it wouldn't find the database YAML sometimes. I don't know what we did to fix it, but in the end, like we just stopped using test environment.
What is the reasoning for us switching, like manually typing in the test every time? Besides just using the development, that's like.
Right now, this is, I mean, it's more, Rails takes away a lot of this for you. It just makes the assumption that when you run things in test, the environment you want is test. So it's going to like create, migrate, and seed databases across all the different ones that you generally use. Right now, it's just to teach, like you have to be specific with which environment you're using.
Okay.
That's all.
The initial, just type this in. We have
Just
no
type this
idea
in,
what it was.
Yeah.
Hard coded app environment to test somewhere.
If we did it back in that other file.
I generally avoid hard coding things inside of here for the reason that if I type in test by accident up here or on purpose just for one thing and I forget and I was like, why doesn't anything work? I have to search for a long time just to find that one specific area. But I try to keep all these the same across the board.
So that was when we leave Code Platoon and we start our unicorn companies. Are we going to have to recreate those files?
No, it's these are built into. Okay. So it's I can kind of show this now. Let's say that. God, no, it's terrible. So, like, if you were to create like a brand new company, right? You're going to need a website of some sort, or a web application of some sort. As you're creating your web app, you're going to use a modern day framework. So Rails has that kind of stuff built in. So when I do Rails new blog, I'm basically saying I'm creating a new Rails project called blog. It's going to run everything here. And if I did subble blog. There's a lot more, and I didn't want to but you kind of asked, all that kind of stuff is still here. You know, it looks a little bit different, but it sets it all up for you already. So this stuff is all I ran was Rails new blog, and it sets up a whole application for me saying this is probably what you're going to need. So yeah, this looks a little bit similar. They got that development, test, production, all that kind of stuff. It looks a little bit different because we're using SQLite by default. We're going to change it to Postgres when we get there. But yeah, you can kind of see this is where we're headed to with many folders. Yes, but it's you're building up slowly, right? When we had more than one file, everyone was like, "Whoa!" And then we had two files. It's just a spec file, no big deal. And then everyone saw this, and everyone's like, "Whoa!" And then when you get to a week from now, 2 weeks from now, you're going to be able to fly pretty quickly through it. I don't want to keep going with this thing. Basically, what's happening here, it's setting the entire Rails environment to the app environment that we mentioned. It's loading up all the fixtures. It's adding the root path to the app so that when you do things like when I load the file of config database YAML, it's starting from the root path at all times rather than relative to where you are. Requiring ActiveRecord everywhere, requiring the database initializer everywhere, and it's requiring the model files between different model files. So every single file has access to, instead of doing require relative blah, every single file has access to every other file. And then this DB right here under migrate, I'm going to create a migration. So let's start with this. All right, so let's say that we are going to start building this out. So we have a fleet management company, has many departments. So I know I need to create a table called departments, no matter what, right? So I'm going to create a migration. One of these may have already been done for you, but I don't like typing this out. So I'm going to use something called the Rails generator. Migration. Okay, there's a command I'm looking for right there. Looks a little something like this. So bin Rails generate migration and then the name of the file. Let's just kind of see what happens. I'm going to call this create departments. I could just do rake, because we're not in Rails yet. So rake. So I run this rake command.
Do rake -t. It should show you the.
Okay.
Where's the migrate? Rake DB migrate. No, not Rake DB.
I want to set up a new migration.
Yeah, Rake DB new underscore migration.
Okay. In that case, I will just do rake DB new migration with create. What was it? What was the table called? Departments. All right, and then so basically, when I run this, when I run rake-t, it lists me all the different rake commands that I have, in addition to what I can what they actually do. So when we're talking about like rake console, it's just an IRB console. So it's just directly connecting to IRB, but you also have the ability to connect with your database at the same place. Rake DB create creates the database from the database URL and so on and so forth. And you can kind of read these at your leisure. But what I've done here is I've created a new migration. And what that did was it just created a new file called under DB migrate, and then this giant ugly string of numbers, and then create departments.rb. Let's kind of take a look at that for a second. So if I go inside of here, I have this create departments migration. You'll notice that this ugly thing over here, if I were to just copy it real quick, is a timestamp. So it's 2017. October 9th at 16:37 UTC time. So, and 37 seconds UTC time. Currently, it's 11:38, which means, and we are 5 hours behind, if I'm not mistaken. So it's 4. Yeah, perfect. So this is like when it was created, and then the name of the file. What's a migration?
What's a migration? Create a table.
What's that? It's, yeah, you can kind of think of it. It does. I mean, it can do that. A migration is basically a script that you run that you write ahead of time to do something to your database. You could be creating a new table. You could be dropping a table. You could be changing the column names. You can be, like for us, when somebody mixed up latitude and longitude, I had to change the names of the columns. So I was like, change the column from latitude to longitude and change the longitude into latitude. So that's something that it's something
instead
that
of going through each single one, you just created.
I just created a thing saying like for everything, just switch the column names around. Okay. And every single time that you modify your database, you're going to create a new migration.
Is that just a short-term solution, or
that is the long-term solution?
Okay, so instead of going through and changing all that stuff,
yeah. Okay. So you can kind of think about like as you're starting to create these very small apps, go ahead and drop and create and migrate all that you want. You're going to run rake DB drop all the time from here on out. When you get to your first job, you won't do that because most likely your first job has millions of records in it. Or if you work for Amazon, imagine their orders table, their orders database. If someone ran rake DB drop by accident, like they've lost 20 plus years of records and all that kind of stuff. Obviously they have backups so they can go back into it, but like they need to make changes all the time. Things that applied way back when do not apply anymore.
So that's just creating the columns?
It could do anything. So this is def change. Anything that happens inside of here. Like you could create a table, you could drop a table, you can create a new column on an already existing table. You can change the name of a column. You can delete a column.
So rake DB drop is calling to this file then?
Rake DB drop is just dropping the database completely.
Anything you do in migrations are going to have to do with like inside the database as a whole. So it's tables, columns, foreign keys, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas rake DB drop is dropping the entire, like the box that the database is. A migration has to do with anything inside the database.
So
I promise I'll cover that more when we get to that.
This create departments table would you go through and constantly adjust this one migration, or would you always create like a different?
So glad you asked that question. So basically, if you take a look at the front, remember when I said this ugly thing up top here? That's a timestamp. So what will happen is, as you get into more and more, like as your company grows larger and larger and new things start to come up, 20 years ago, Amazon.com only probably had one migration, just orders or something like that. And over the past 20 years, they probably had thousands of migrations to their database, meaning they're changing their database thousands of times. The timestamp is important because it's executing that first thing first and then going based off of timestamp to do the next thing. So it's like if my original database here has a departments and it has like a first name, right? And I have another migration that says, oh, I'm going to delete the column and it runs out of order. Like one has to exist before the other. So you definitely want to create new migrations. Anytime you want to update anything, you want to create new migrations.
So they just have a file that's massive.
It's a folder that's going to be massive, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even, yeah, when I was working at Groupon, it was like for a small app that only one team was using, we had like 30 migrations because we needed to change things that many times. All right, so let's see. Each department has a name, a headquarters city phone number, and email address for the department head. So I'm just going to do t.string for name, t.string for headquarters city, t.string for phone number. Does a phone number start with 0? Is there a? It could, right?
Country code, right?
Country code is, yeah. So I'll save it as a string because sometimes when you put a 0 as the first number, it cuts that out. And email address. So t.string email address. Maybe boss email address, head, department head email address. Make it real clear. All right. The company offers multiple healthcare plans to its employees to accommodate how much they want to spend or protect it. Each healthcare plan has a name attribute and an enrollment deadline date. Okay, so I'm going to guess I'm going to need to create another table called healthcare plans. Similarly, I'm just going to create a bunch of attributes. So t.string called name, t.date time for enrollment deadline. I think that covers everything here. Each healthcare plan is available to one or more healthcare groups. God, this sucks. So it belongs to a healthcare group. Belongs to many healthcare groups. So I'm going to need a join table in here. Sucks. Employee groups. This might make more sense to actually just draw it out first. What do you think?
I'm okay with drawing that.
How about this? I will do it on here. So quick database diagrams. Or no, I'll do this. The movie one. A whole bunch of tables. Now I'll connect them.
This tool looks.
It's probably going to get deleted. There's many other ones. This
Push
is
it up for open source or something else.
we have been pushing for that for quite a while. All right, so a fleet management company has many departments. So I know that I have a table called fleet management companies. Actually no, we just do departments. All right, so we know that. We know it has healthcare plans. So that's another table name. We know that they have healthcare employee groups. has an employee. Okay. All right. So we'll go one by one. So all I did first was I just figured like what. How do I delete this table? Move table.
I kept a enrollment table.
We'll definitely need some join tables pretty soon. So I just kind of went through the README and just kind of said like, what are the big nouns that we're talking about, right? So there were departments, healthcare plans, healthcare employee groups, and actual employees. And I'm just going to go one by one to get all of the information in there, and then I'm going to think about how I'm going to create my associations, and then we'll probably stop there to take a break for lunch. Okay. So every department has a name, headquarters city, phone number, and email address. So this is going to be just a bunch of text. So we'll just do name, headquarters city, phone number, and a boss email address. Healthcare, let's go to the next one. The company offers multiple healthcare plans. And that makes sense. You go to you have the option to choose a more expensive or less expensive healthcare plan. So each healthcare plan has a name and enrollment deadline. So this one is going to have a text field called name. Then probably a date, time for enrollment deadline. Okay, next one. Each healthcare plan is available to one or more employee groups. And each healthcare employee groups has access to one or more healthcare plans. So what kind of a relationship is this? Is this it belongs to, has many, many-to-many, one-to-one? What's that? It's a many-to-many because it's like each healthcare plan is available to multiple groups, right? So it's like if you're working for Chase.com, like, and I have 3 different plans, I can offer those 3 different plans to, you know, the accounting department, the HR, and staffing, and all that. Like, it's a many-to-many relationship. I have many kids. My kids have many parents. So I know that I'm going to need to connect healthcare plans to employee groups. So I'm going to need to create some sort of join table, because when you have a many-to-many relationship, you're going to need a join table in the middle. So I'm going to put it right in the middle of them, and I'm going to call this. Remember what I said. You take the 2 names and you just smash them together. Healthcare plans, healthcare employee groups. It's horrible, but you know that it connects these 2 together, which means immediately that you're going to have a healthcare plan ID, which is going to be an integer, and then you're also going to have a healthcare employee group ID as well. I'm going to connect this here and connect this here. So now, like, a healthcare plan has many healthcare employee groups, and a healthcare employee group has many healthcare plans. I believe that knocks out these. Each healthcare employee group has access to 1 or more, okay? Each healthcare employee group has a name attribute and belongs to a department. And if it belongs to a department, where does the ID go? Does it go here on the department, or does it go here on the healthcare employee group? If this belongs to a department, then I have a department ID. I'm going to connect this to down here. Each employee has a first, last name, age, and salary. Simple. I'll just do
the employee groups, as far as like, what what I see from that, that means that each department has an employee group. Like that, it's only got, every department only has one employee group.
No, a department has many employee groups. So it's kind of like if you're in accounting, right? There could be payroll under accounting. There could be business expenses under accounting. So those would be different employee groups under one department.
I get that you have different employee groups, but maybe I just don't.
What's going on?
Right, but like it looks like each department only has one employee group based on the department of that one
I see.
ID.
So there's going to be many different employee groups, and each one of those is going to belong to a certain department. Like I wish I could have this.
Gotcha.
I wish I could have an arrow that goes towards that. So a employee has a name, an age, and a salary. I have this as just a text field. This one is a number, and then the salary is also going to be a number because no one's going to have a 0 in the front, so we're safe there. Each employee belongs to a single healthcare employee group. So that means it belongs to healthcare employee group. So this one is going to belong to a healthcare employee group. So healthcare employee group ID, which means that I'm going to connect this to here. No. Get rid of that. This connects to this. Next one down. An employee does not have to be enrolled in healthcare, but does have to belong to a department. So an employee belongs to a department. Which means that I actually have to have a department ID over here. And the reason I have to do that is that I currently do not have healthcare through Code Platoon because my wife has healthcare. So I don't need to have a healthcare plan myself, but I do need to belong to a department. So I cannot, even though that an employee can get to a department through healthcare employee groups, if I don't have a healthcare plan, then I can't connect to my department. So I have to have that department ID directly from the employee to the department. We're almost there. We got each employee belongs to a healthcare employee group through their department. Each employee belongs to a healthcare employee group through their department. Each employee belongs to a healthcare employee group through their department. I think we did that. Is that already there? And then finally, an employee can only be enrolled in a healthcare plan that is part of their department. Okay, that's fine. I think more or less this is the database of how to set it up. People feeling comfortable with this?
You said just
Super weird connection between employees to departments to healthcare employee groups, and then employees directly to healthcare employee groups. It's almost like doubled up.
So you're saying, so you are displeased with
the wording was kind of
it makes it feel like a department, specific department has a specific employee
that's
group
what I think.
versus it's just
sure you can fix that.
That's what I meant. But
I'm with you. And it really comes in when you that last statement. Really okay, their healthcare employee group is based on their department, but it makes sense when you think of it as each department can have multiple healthcare employee groups.
Yeah.
It does say in the last statement in that directions, to go back to it, it says, part of the department's healthcare employee group, singular.
Yeah, exactly.
Nah, I can fix it. It's good feedback. I'll just fix it for next time. But
heads on the desk.
My bad. So I'll take a screenshot of this, Taylor, and I'll send it to you.
me too.
I'll just send it to everybody. But how does this is an idea of how a schema is set up. You kind of see. You just kind of go one by one. Do I need any join tables? How are these two related? And just kind of go one by one. So yeah, let's take a break for lunch. When we get back, I will have all of this typed out inside of different migrations so that we can see this.
Can you